Hey audio geeks, today we're talking about Bluetooth noise cancelling full-size headphones. Now this is a relatively niche area and it tends to be populated by ultra expensive premium models such as the Apple AirPods Max, still a painful £550 from Apple, the slightly cheaper Sony 1000XM5s at £379, and they're probably the market leader, or the seemingly more reasonable Momentum 4 from Sennheiser, which will still set you back a princely £300. Now, those all have their merits, and I've reviewed the AirPods Max and the Sonys in previous videos. But how about if you aren't willing to spend the big bucks? Is it still possible to get great sound and decent noise cancelling for much less moolah? Well, today we are taking a look at the temptingly priced Final UX3000. Final are a well-regarded Japanese audio manufacturer. They produce a wide range of IEMs, for example, covering the full price range from budget to ultra high-end boutique sets. The UX3000, you'll be pleased to hear, is definitely a budget offering at just £119 here in the UK. I bought this pair myself from Amazon UK, and they certainly have a no-frills look and feel about them. Inside the box you get the cans, a PU pouch, a USB-C charging cable, and, please take note Apple, a 3.5mm wired adapter which allows you to use them passively. Now, charging them takes just over an hour, and this gives you up to 35 hours of playback without noise cancelling and 25 with noise cancelling turned on, which I think is pretty competitive. The cans themselves are definitely made completely of plastic, and they do feel just that bit cheaper than the equally plastic Sonys. They feature a well padded but fairly narrow headband and reasonably well cushioned ear pads. The ear pads, however, aren't the biggest, and depending on the size of your ears, they may go round your ears completely. Unlike the latest Sonys, these do fold up, so it's easier to stow them away in your bag. Also, unlike the Sonys, they do retain physical buttons to control playback, volume and noise cancelling. This is so refreshing, and in my opinion, clicky buttons are much better than unreliable touch and swipe controls. You might think that these look a little bit boring, but I think they are nicely understated, and they're certainly not going to make you a target for muggers on the underground. They're quite comfortable on the head, with neither too much of a clamping force or too much pressure on the top of your head. The ear cups are comfortable, but I did find that my ears got quite hot and itchy after about 30 to 45 minutes or so. And remember, that's in the cooler autumn weather. It would probably be much worse in summer. Now, they don't have the ear comfort of either the Sonys or the much heavier AirPods Max. Pairing them is easy, and a nice feature is that they support multi-point pairing to two devices. So for example, you can have your laptop and your phone connected to the headphones at the same time, and you can switch audio between them. Codec wise, you get SBC and AAC with Apple devices, and if you're on Android, you also get aptX and aptX low latency for movies and games. Sadly, there is no LDAC support on these. Okay, on to the sound then. Let's start with the frequency response curve, which is interesting. So you get the usual mid-bass boost, but it tapers off into the upper bass, lower mid-range zone, so you don't get horrible bloaty bass bleed. The mids are fairly neutral, but notably in the upper mids, you don't get the usual pinner gain. We'll come back to how that affects the sound in a minute, but there are no hidden horrors in the treble or anywhere in the frequency response for that matter. Music-wise, I've been loving Taylor Swift's new album, Midnights, plural. I've also been systematically going through the Led Zeppelin remasters on Tidal, and I've also been taking in the Arctic Monkeys' fascinating new album, which in my opinion anyway is much better than their previous one. So my impressions are that these Finals are really pleasant, reasonably neutral sounding headphones as long as they're connected via Bluetooth and utilising their inbuilt DAC and amp. I think there's definitely some DSP, digital signal processing, going on, because if you listen to them wired with the power off, they don't sound half as good. And in my opinion, in wired passive mode, they sound really quite flat. So for the purposes of this review, I'm really only talking about the sound quality when they're connected via Bluetooth and powered on. I like the bass on the UX3000 very much. It's nicely textured and really tight, bringing plenty of energy to bass-heavy electronic tracks. There isn't much sub-bass growl here, but the mid-bass is very polished. I like the lower mids. Gravelly male vocals such as Mark Lanigan's are given plenty of grit and depth, and they are quite prominent in the mix. Now, the one area where I find the UX3000 is a bit lacking is in the upper mids, which means that high male vocals or female vocals are slightly recessed. Now, you can see that in the frequency response curve that we looked at before, and I think the sound reflects that quite accurately. I would have loved these female vocals particularly to be a little bit more forward, and Taylor Swift therefore ends up sounding just a little bit polite for my liking. Of course, having recessed upper mids and low treble means that you're not going to get any sibilance or shoutiness, so these are not in any way fatiguing. Now, the relative imbalance of the slightly recessed lower treble and elevated mid and higher treble might make these sound just a little bit bright, but I didn't have a problem with that. I found these particularly good, therefore, for listening to jazz as well as electronic music. Technicalities are pretty limited, as you might imagine. Soundstage is really narrow and the imaging is somewhat indistinct. Instrument separation is not particularly good either, and that makes these sound a little thick during busy passages of orchestral music in particular. But remember that these are problems that afflict even more expensive closed-back Bluetooth cans, and I don't think the UX3000 fare much worse than, for example, the Sonys in that regard. Timbre is actually really good, avoiding the sharp metallic upper mids that you sometimes hear on cheap Bluetooth cans. Detail retrieval is middling, and when you switch from a decent set of wired planar headphones, for example, like the Sundaras, you can easily tell that this is the case. Overall, though, these offer a pleasant sound signature and acceptable technicalities, particularly if you consider that most of the time you're going to be using these out and about in noisy environments where you won't be able to make out subtle nuances and fine details. So how about that all-important noise cancelling which sets these apart from many similarly priced pairs? Well, it's really not too bad. Obviously, you get a bit of passive noise isolation due to the closed cup nature of the ear cups. But in addition, you can engage the active noise cancelling mode, and it does make a big difference. It's really, really good at cutting out constant low frequency tones such as engine noise or traffic noise, but it will not cope very well with sharp bursts at higher frequencies, such as the proverbial crying baby. I wore them on the train down to London and then on the London Underground, and I have to say they're definitely not as good as the Sonys or the AirPods Max, both of which have class-leading noise cancellation, but they still did allow me to enjoy my music above the hubbub without cranking the volume up too much, which is what it's all about, really. What's interesting with these is that you can turn the noise cancelling on independently. So, for example, you can engage noise cancelling if you're listening to the headphones with a passive wired connection, which we've already said doesn't sound that great. What this also means is that you have to remember to turn the noise cancelling off as well as powering the headphones off if they're in Bluetooth mode. Otherwise, you'll turn the headphones off and the nice Japanese lady does say power off, but the noise cancelling will still be on and it'll slowly sap your battery. And that happened to me when I first got them and in typical fashion didn't read the instructions. It would have been far better if the main power button turned off the headphones and the noise cancelling together by default. Also, there is no form of transparency mode here. If you want to hear what's going on around you, you literally just have to sling them around your neck. It's old-fashioned transparency mode. But look, these are the nitpicks because these cost 3 times less than the Sonys and almost 5 times less than the AirPods Max. They absolutely don't sound 3 times worse than either of those cans. You do lose out on build quality, you lose out on niceties such as a hard shell case and features such as auto pausing music when you take them off. Also, remember, there is no companion app to allow you to tweak the sound signature or the controls. What you do get though is a solid and comfortable set of great sounding cans with decent noise cancellation, all for £119, and that makes the UX3000 a very easy recommendation in my book, and they are definitely worthy of an Audio Fixation Bronze Award. So yeah, I'm really happy with my purchase of these. I'm definitely going to keep them, and they have become my main out and about headphones, just to chuck in my backpack and take everywhere. So I think that's all I've got to say in this video, folks. Look, there they are folded up. Genius. The latest Sonys don't do those, neither do the AirPods Max. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below as always, and if you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and also subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. Stay tuned for plenty more, and take care.